So I'd like to welcome the King's community near and far listening to this webinar put on by the King's Alumni Office and the Entrepreneurship Institute. Today's webinar, How to Start a Venture, is part of a larger series of how-to events and webinars specifically created for students and alumni who are in the early stages of career development. Be sure to sign up to the King's Connect platform, our online platform for students and alumni, to look out for future how-to events and our monthly e-news. Now, I'll hand things over to the chair of this webinar, Ed Halliday, Head of Ventures at the Entrepreneurship Institute.
Thanks so much, Priya. It's great to be here. So my name's Ed. I'm the Head of Ventures at the Entrepreneurship Institute, which means I look after all early stage startup development at the university. I believe that entrepreneurship is a really extraordinary way to discover your potential in the world. And so I'm really excited today to be speaking to two fantastic entrepreneurs, Madeline Petrow, co-founder and CEO of Mamoq, and Jessica Berlin, founder and managing director of CoStruct, about their experiences and some of the challenges and opportunities of building an early stage company. But first of all, a little bit about what we do at the Entrepreneurship Institute. So I love what we do at the Institute because we support students, staff, and alumni, not just to develop amazing ideas that can change the world, but also to develop the skills they need for an entrepreneurial career. And since 2015, we've done a whole range of different stuff and reached over 30,000 people. And on the Accelerator program, which is what I run, we've helped entrepreneurs build and scale over 60 ventures. And the great news is that applications for next year's program, so for the 2019 to 20 program, are open now. To give you a bit more information about the program, it exists to give 20 teams the support, mentorship, and access to funding to help them to reach their potential. It's a program that lasts for 12 months. It's worth about £60,000 and includes access to mentors who are experts in the field every single day, access to grant funding of up to £125,000, to our network of investors, of which there are several hundred, and most of all, access and membership of an amazing community of entrepreneurs right in the heart of London, in our beautiful Bush House office building. You can find out more about how to apply on our website, which is kcl.ac.uk/accelerator. And today is partly about learning about entrepreneurship in general, but also how you can learn from these two fantastic King's alumni about how you can follow a similar journey, potentially right here at King's College London. So the format of the webinar is that we'll speak for about 20 minutes, and then you can submit questions via the Q&A feature, which we'll address at the end. So that's all from me for now, and I'll let our speakers introduce themselves. So Madeline, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure. I'm a King's alumni. I studied international development of emerging economies a few years back now. And now I am the CEO and co-founder of Mamoq, an online fashion marketplace dedicated to ethical and sustainable fashion. It's not the most obvious jump from international development to online fashion, but it is. You can really connect the dots of my story. So I learned a lot about the fashion industry and globalized supply chains while I was actually here at King's. And that was kind of what popped the lid on my understanding of the fashion industry. I didn't go right into launching Mamoq, but instead I actually wanted to work at kind of an impact investment fund. And I applied for tons of jobs, Ashoka, Acumen Fund here, didn't get into any of them. So I figured out what it was that I was missing to get into those jobs, which was business acumen, and then applied for jobs where I could find that. So I worked at a crowdfunding company, learning and reading business plans all day, every day, so that I could go back and apply to those jobs I originally wanted. But it turns out reading business plans all day can really inspire you to make a business of your own. And so by knowledge of the fashion industry from my degree combined with this kind of entrepreneurial zest, if you will, was kind of the magic formula that led me to launch Mamoq today.
Great, I'll assume that's the transition intro for me to introduce myself. Hi guys, my name is Jessica Berlin, and by coincidence, I also live in Berlin. I'm the founder and MD of CoStruct, as Ed mentioned. I studied at King's also as a master's student in 2014. And yeah, I belong sort of to the half generation above the current, where it was customary to do your master's degree after getting a bit of work experience. So I did my master's sort of mid-career after working for about 8 years in public policy. So I worked in foreign affairs, security policy, international development aid in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. And basically saw from those experiences what kind of gaps were existing between public and private sector approaches to economic development in emerging economies and frontier markets. And so I left the public sector with a broad sense of a lot of things that are going wrong, but not a clear path of what I wanted to do next. And so in that space, I then went to King's and did a master's in political economy of emerging markets. And during that time, you know, poking around London, looking at job opportunities in the private sector, you know, as a risk analyst for banks or large companies, this kind of thing. I kind of saw also, you know, the gap in the market, so to speak, and that entrepreneurial spirit kind of hits you and say, hey, if I work at a bank or a big corporate, it's going to be a different accounting system, but at the end of the day, it's a large institution setting its own agenda. And the whole reason I left the public sector was because the large institution setting the agenda had missed the point, had missed the target. So how can I create something as an entrepreneur that's smaller and more agile, that can then be more innovative and function as a kind of bridge builder between these two worlds. And so that's basically exactly what I did after I left King's, and created a company that now, on the one hand, consults and does, you know, strategy advisory work for public, private, and nonprofit institutions on how to design, you know, multilateral, bilateral aid programs, CSR programs, you know, impact funds, et cetera, in a way that maximizes both the financial, the fiscal sustainability of the initiatives, as well as the development or society. And then on the other hand, we also are sort of a do tank and design our own programs and initiatives that fill gaps and connect dots in that space.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for sharing a bit more about your story, where your ideas came from, and a little bit about what you do. And now, starting with you, Jessica, it'd be great to hear what's been happening and what the journey has been since you started with CoStruct.
Sure. Let's see where to start. It's been a long path. So I know for most folks approaching the idea of having a startup or whatnot, you probably won't end up doing the kind of thing that I'm doing. So I'm going to try and frame my story or CoStruct's path in a kind of terms that could be broadly applicable to someone also just trying to sell a product, you know, to build and sell a product. So maybe, yeah, try to frame it in a more business way rather than in the kind of nerdy policy way that has been our path. But I think the first thing, the first phase of what we did and what any new entrepreneur would have to do is know your customer and understand their needs. What's the demand? What's your target market, and what do they need that they don't have already? And in that space, you know, as said, I had the kind of background in those worlds, so I saw very clearly at the big macro level policy side what was missing. But what I didn't have a hard grasp on, just an idea of what that would actually look like on the ground. So so for the first 6 months after I finished my master's, I basically retraced some of my past career steps and spent some time in East Africa, in Southeast Asia, and in the Middle East, connecting with contacts and, contacts of friends of mine who were working with tech entrepreneurs and MSMEs in those regions, to see what was already happening from the private sector side in the space of digital entrepreneurship, business for impact, social enterprise, etc. Basically seeing what's out there and where could someone with my skill set actually add value. Because whether you do what I do, or you're selling ice cream, or building an app, if somebody's already doing what you do and doing it better, you better have a really good reason for why you think your way is better. You need to have a USP. So through that process, this is very much the fast forward version. Then was able to identify very clearly, okay, this is what's already operating, this is what's already working well in the sector, and here and here are the gaps. And so then, basically positioned myself in those areas as someone who was, ready and willing to solve the problems that weren't really being touched on yet. And in the process of doing this, I guess, in a normal kind of commercial setting, you would call what I did marketing, and building my customer base and brand recognition. In my world, we would never call it that, but in a business sense, that's basically what it was. Put our ideas and concepts out there. We were in Myanmar, in Kenya, in India, and it's a combination of consulting contracts, speaking at conferences, meeting with investors, meeting with government agencies responsible for attracting FDI, and basically placing ourselves as a thought leader, a new, small but insightful thought leader in this space. And in doing so, then we were able to get our first bigger contracts, and kind of grow our base. And that was sort of the beginning phase. And now it's basically been growing into larger projects, I'd have to say. And also, enjoyably, it's shifting less from the advisory and more into the creative and actual, creation mode. Because now that we've, given other folks enough good ideas, then, it's kind of builds your legitimacy or your stake in the market. And now we're able to actually build new ideas and programs, and then get external financing for those.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing more. You actually touched on the two things that we feel best predict success for the entrepreneurs that we've worked with, and are actually our strongest criteria when selecting candidates for our accelerator, which is, first of all, entrepreneurs that know something that others don't about their customer, about the problem they're solving for. So going out into the world and really learning from those people. And the second is that ideas are not enough. Lots of people have
exactly.
ideas, but that's not what is fundamentally entrepreneurial. It's about getting out into the field, as you said, and executing on those ideas and testing and learning and seeing what happens. And those are the two things we feel best predict success in our space. So thanks so much for sharing more. Madeline, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'm going to echo quite a lot of what Jessica said, perhaps not so eloquently. But yeah, I think that for us, as I kind of said before, it was really identifying a gap in the market. I didn't want to create a business and then think of an idea. I thought of the idea and then challenged myself to create the business. And the idea really came for Mamoq from my own internal frustration at not being able to find clothing that I felt positive about buying. Especially, I think now we think a lot about our plastic consumption and our meat consumption and our energy and our water use, but our clothing consumption is really a really undervalued segment of society that we don't critically engage with in the same way. And we really should be, because the fashion industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. It's rife with human rights violations, and coming from an international development perspective, it's such a massive industry that it has so much potential to be a source of economic empowerment, when in reality, it really is more characterized by exploitation. So I was looking out to find independent fashion labels that I felt good about supporting, and I saw a really fragmented and confusing market. And I thought that there surely had to be other people like me wanting to be more mindful of where they bought their clothes from. And so I actually just started a blog. That was my first step. I thought, well, I'm going to write about it and see if other people are interested in it as well. So I kept my job, I created a blog, I put up some social media accounts, and I saw that other people, especially sustainable fashion in the past couple of years, has just been getting so much momentum, and I just was really at the right place at the right time because people were starting to think about it. And so I was using the blog just to kind of show different brands that I had found and explain what they were doing. And I'd always been very interested in, you know, where business and social development goals aligned. And so found incredible social enterprises doing really wonderful things through producing fashion. And so then the idea was, okay, well, why hasn't someone else already done this business? It's not wildly difficult or innovative to go out and find a bunch of really awesome brands and bring them together in one place. So the next step for me, you know, before I really thought, okay, I'm going to run this business, the next step for me was thinking, why hasn't someone else already done this? And looking out there on what was at the market and seeing what are the downfalls of the options that are there now. And one of the biggest downfalls for me as a consumer was the lack of clarity, the lack of standardization, the lack of explanation. I was very wary of greenwashing, using sustainability claims that were unfounded. And I didn't think that I found anyone that I really trusted in that space. So from the marketplace side, I thought, okay, it's not really great, but what about the brands? Why aren't more brands coming together? So the next step for me was to go out and speak to those brands that I thought were really amazing and say, hey, what are your sales channels? How do you reach your target customers? Who are your target customers? Why aren't you selling with marketplaces? Do you want to be selling with marketplaces? And just really understanding from their perspective why there wasn't already this incredible marketplace. And what we were able to identify a lot of key barriers to entry that prohibited small independent fashion labels from selling on marketplaces. A lot of it is really simple. It's just they're small teams. Most of the brands we work with are teams of kind of under 5. Usually one has a background experience in design and fashion, and the other has a background in sustainability, international development, something more humanitarian, and they just don't have capacity to handle the manual workload associated with selling on marketplaces. And so that was kind of the impetus for then us to sit down with a drawing board and say, what would we need to design to enable these brands to come on and sell with us? And in the beginning, we thought that our differentiation in the market was our commitment to content, our commitment to standardization, and the way that we faced to the customer's perspective. But what we later found out after we had essentially built it is that that was the real impressive thing about our marketplace. So, you know, we went to Berlin Fashion Week, Ethical Fashion Week Berlin, to kind of scout for some brands, and we got so many no's of people saying, no, we don't work with marketplaces. And then once we explained how our systems were, we saw tons of no's turn to yeses. And that was because we had designed a platform not based on what we thought they needed, or it's because we went and listened to them first before we hit the drawing board. And so now we launched with about 25 brands a year and a half ago, and now work with over 80. And it's been a really amazing shift from us seeking out brands to now brands applying for us. And what's really great is that we have kind of a de facto exclusivity with a lot of our partners simply because they won't work with other marketplaces, which adds a great element of brand discovery for our customers, because they know when they come to Mamoq that we're going to have a lot of brands that they can't find anywhere else. And it takes the hassle from getting onto page 14 of Google to find them in the first place. So I think that, yeah, just echoing what Ed and Jessica are saying is that some simple ideas are the biggest, and it's just about identifying how you're filling a gap in the market, and it's making sure that you're aware, whether you're B2C or B2B, that you understand what your customers and your partners need before you build your product. Because if you go product first and then try to sell it, you're going to think, oh man, I would have done it so differently. So I think that is the key learning, is that understanding your market and understanding how you're going to operate first is really the most important step. And that's something that you can do while maintaining your other job. That's something that you can do. It's all about research and knowledge and understanding.
Thanks so much, Madeline. Super interesting insights, and particularly to think about actually where you first and how you first started trialing your idea. Often people feel that they need to raise 50 or 100,000 pounds, build a platform, and then start testing and selling. But actually, you did that through a blog and started learning from feedback on that blog, which in this day and age costs nothing or next to nothing. So really, really interesting to hear that story. Now, to move on, in the startup context, often there are all sorts of questions or challenges that will be new, that will be difficult, that will require experts to turn to. And that's one of the great values of an accelerator program, that you are surrounded by people who have the experience, who have the knowledge to support you. So starting with you, Madeline, could you talk about some of those challenges that you have faced over the last few years and how you've turned to mentors and experts in your network to help solve them?
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time to talk about all of the challenges. There are certainly plenty, but I think that the biggest thing I've learned, kind of a motto, is that if there's a solution, it's not a problem. And that if you can find a solution, to not get worked up about it, because you will inevitably face tons of challenges. For instance, our first challenge was before we even launched. When we were still the blog, we were called the Coco. And Coco Chanel saw that we were launching a marketplace under the same name and sued us. And so kind of 3 weeks before the launch of the marketplace, we had to rebrand. And so, if there's a solution, the solution is rebranding, it's not a problem. So that is one of the reasons we have a wildly unique name, because we were really uninterested in dealing in any more trademark legal battles. But I think that the biggest thing that we really relied on is support networks. So even when we first had the idea, and we had the idea, as I said, for months and months before we jumped in full force, was relying on the King's network. We went and spoke with the entrepreneur in residence when we had the idea to chat about it. He gave us a lot of good feedback on how to conduct the market research that we're talking about, how to test the assumptions on which your business is based on, and get feedback to know that you're on the right direction. We applied for King's 20. We didn't get in the first time. So we looked for other incubators and accelerators because we were, just two people. And not only did we want the support and mentorship, we really wanted the community of the other entrepreneurs, because sitting just yourself at your kitchen table, depending on the type of person you are, for me, it could become quite lonely quite quickly. So we actually applied for a program at Cambridge University, specifically focused on socially minded businesses called Cambridge Social Ventures. And we picked up our stuff and moved to Cambridge and really immersed ourselves there to launch the business. Our business mentor is now the chairwoman of our board. And we had a really great support foundation there, helping us think about things like, you know, embedding social locks into our articles of association so that our mission was always protected in our legal documents, and really core foundational governance that I would have never thought about because we just didn't have the experience. And then once we were a little bit bigger, we moved back down to London and threw our hat in the ring for a second time here at King's and got in. So now we're here at King's, and it's a really similar story of, you know, the mentorship, the advice, the community is so invaluable because inevitably when you're in a room with 60 other entrepreneurs and you face a challenge, someone in the room there has already experienced it, and you can go over and say, let's talk about that time that, you know, investors turned out to be competitors. You know, we had an experience where we had some competitors posing as investors to learn about your business model, and, you know, it's wild things that you never anticipate, because I think that you really never properly anticipate all of the different hats you wear as an entrepreneur. And so being surrounded by people that have gone through different experiences is extremely, extremely helpful. So yeah, I would say that seek out support and read the mom test. I think that is like the thing that I wish someone had told me to read on day one. It's a really short book. It's like you could read it in a long train ride, and it really shows the importance of testing your idea essentially on someone other than your mom, because they're always going to say it's a great idea, and what you really want is the most critical feedback. So like, you know, my business mentor at Cambridge, the first meeting we had was so devastating. I mean, she just picked out every flaw that we had in our business. And I remember my business partner Lenny and I left, and we went and we ate lunch. We had soup, just like head in bowl, no talking. Oh, we've done everything wrong. But then you sit down and you look at everything that they've said is wrong, and you find a solution. And I think that that is so important, that you don't want to look for feedback of someone telling you great job. You want to look for feedback of someone you saying, no, it's actually, you have to change a lot, because that's how you learn and grow and kind of overcome any obstacle.
Thanks so much. I'm smiling because sometimes I feel like a portion of my working week could be replaced. I could just be replaced by like an audio recording or a robot just saying, read the mum test, because I tell so many people, and it's such a good book. So for those of you listening, if you haven't come across the book, it's by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's a very short read, as Madeline said, and well worth the time. I thought a couple of interesting takeaways from what you said. First of all, being prepared to be proven wrong by your customers. I think that's really interesting. Startups are so much about assumptions, and sometimes your customers might tell you otherwise, and having that ability to pivot, test, and keep developing and from learning from your customers is really interesting. And the second, what a cool story that you applied before and being unsuccessful at King's. So the other thing was like, be prepared to prove others wrong, right? To maybe not get the outcomes you want immediately, but go away and develop and change and tweak your model and try again, right? Because not everything will work out as you expect or as you hope from day one. Thanks so much. Jessica, over to you. Some thoughts and reflections on the challenges you faced and how you've kind of sought help from your network in solving them.
Sure, thanks. Well, I've certainly never been sued by Coke, so that's good. makes me glad we don't really sell things and don't have to navigate that minefield. But certainly other kinds of challenges have come our way. Gosh, we've trying to make it as relevant as possible to folks in the commercial sector. I think one of the toughest things, if your product is something really innovative, is building the faith and legitimacy of your innovation, right? Because if you are coming with something that people haven't seen before, and you are Apple or Huawei or some other large company, then people will say, wow, this cool new thing from Apple, I want it, I love it, that's brilliant, what a good idea. But if that same new game-changing idea comes from a place, from a company, from a startup that you have never heard of, and doesn't have millions worth in marketing and graphics and design to make it all look really legit and polished, then folks might take that exact same concept and say, well, what that is? No, that'll never work. We don't need this. Legitimacy and image matters when you're in the innovation space. And I think that was one of the challenges, and to a certain extent remains a challenge for us when we're coming with kind of sector busting, game-changing ideas. There's a lot of pushback from the existing market that says, no, we don't need to change. We like things the way we are, and our stuff looks much shinier than yours, so it must be more legit. And this kind of dynamic, having to change a customer perception. I mean, in our case, it's, ministries and, multilaterals, but at the end of the day, that's your customer, right? So how do you help customers understand that what you're offering is worth investing in? You're not already a major player in the market. And the way we've done that is simply engage. And what would that mean if you're doing a classic kind of sales? It's let customers interact with your product, with what you're offering. Let them see for themselves why it's unique, why it's different, why it's better. And in our case, we do that through workshops, through discussions, through networking, because obviously it's not a hard product on the marketplace. But this is something that if you're trying to position yourself as unique, can be a challenge. Another issue that we've come up against, that I think also a lot of startups in the more traditional sectors also face, is just basically in the early stages, getting your revenue up. If you've got a big long-term plan, well, that's great. But if you're not generating your monthly revenues in the near term, then you will never get there. So you need to be able to keep your eye on the prize in the long term, but you really have to structure your time and your resources. Resources meaning whether that's money or whether that's people's time and energy, on making sure you keep that near-term revenue stream going, even while you build something bigger for the long term. There's also, a challenge for people of color, for women and members of other non-white Anglo-Saxon male groups. It's also sometimes that legitimacy question has also been a challenge sometimes. I'm having technical difficulties, so you can't see me, but I'm a young woman, mixed race. Well, I'm in my mid-30s, but let's just say a lot of times I get guessed younger. And so when you walk into a meeting and you have a full-on seat at the table as a partner, or you're in a conference and you're up to be, a keynote speaker in the next session, and folks that you're supposed to be eye to eye with and go, oh, are you the intern? Can you tell me where to get this and that, or what the Wi-Fi is? And that kind of pat on the head, that even if it's not meant, it's certainly not meant, intentionally, as a put down or whatever. But it does, it changes the dynamic and kind of that being taken seriously as an equal. And and I know lots of I work a lot in emerging markets and African, Asian, Middle Eastern entrepreneurs, and especially the female founders, working in a very male-dominated space, struggling with getting time with an investor, even just getting FaceTime, and getting that follow-up call and that follow-up to the follow-up. And I wish I could say there's an easy answer or an easy fix to that challenge, but it just basically, if you're, you've just got to kind of roll with the punches, but but also this to your comment, Ed, about networks, is find and use your allies. Because, and sorry, lads, if this is not entirely relevant for you, but bear with us. Find your allies, because, for example, I've got a couple of friends / mentors who are in their 50s and 60s, who are extremely successful white male investors, who are not macho or discriminatory in any way, shape, or form. They know me. They trust my work. They believe in me. And on a couple of occasions, I kind of gave them a ring and said, hey, I need a seat at that table, and that they're not taking me seriously. Can you get me in that room? And they did, and it's simple as that. Because, let people help you. When you have an ally at your back who can open doors, and now this is relevant to anybody, right? This is no longer just a gender specific thing, but for anybody. If you're struggling to get a foot in the door for whatever reason, and you have somebody who's got your back and who believes in you, but maybe you're too shy to reach out for that support, well, just remember, they're really busy, and you're one of dozens, hundreds of people that they know and do business with. So don't be shy. Raise your hand. Don't ask the world, but if it's something something really doable that makes sense, where you're not like being a pain in their ass, then people in general are happy to help. So let them help you.
Thanks so much, Jessica. I really agree that actually human beings, however complex we might be, fundamentally, if someone asks us for help, usually the response is pretty positive, right? So
yeah, and especially with young entrepreneurs, especially people who are entrepreneurs in an impact-driven space, the kind of people who really have influence, who care about these things, they are actually hungry for the chance to support folks in this space. They might be zillionaires from working in the oil industry or some like random usual big business area, but if they can use their clout and their networks and even their funding to help somebody like you, you're not just asking them for a favor, you're giving them an opportunity to contribute to something that they genuinely care about. And maybe Ed, if you give me a sec, I think that if I could leave you guys with one thing, I would say, remember, when you're asking somebody for help, whether that's an investor that you're asking for money, or an influential contact you're asking for any sort of assistance, the way you ask influences the response. And so if you're going in there feeling uncertain, feeling insecure, feeling like, oh gosh, little old me, asking this big important investor or whoever for help, no, you're offering them an opportunity to support something they care about. Go in there with confidence, go in there excited, go in there offering a way to collaborate. You're not begging, you're offering. And if they say no, that's fine. But it really can change the energy in the conversation when you yourself don't feel like you're begging for a favor. So be confident, believe in yourself, and they'll believe in you.
Absolutely, that it's not a one-way street, that actually that they get a whole set of kind of outcomes and experiences from supporting you, right?
Right, yeah.
From both sides. So we've just had a question through which touches on some of what you were talking about, Jessica. So someone has mentioned that they had a similar experience in academia, thinking about your comments about diversity and challenges on top of those more common ones like funding, branding, etc. So Madeline, over to you. Could you share some sort of thoughts on your advice for finding mentors, the right mentors, and crafting a healthy and fruitful relationship with them?
Well, yeah, I think it's a relationship. So you want to find someone that you do get along with, for sure. I think that I've been really lucky in the sense that most of the mentors that I have started working with have been through more formal channels. So incubators, accelerators, we also applied through just a mentorship program. I don't know, my business partner, Lenny, found it. We essentially applied to have a mentor. And so there's some structure if you find a mentor through an organization that kind of sets up entrepreneurs with mentors, because I think that there's a similar level of expectation on what each side is supposed to bring to the table. And I've had a lot of different mentor relationships, and exactly as you say, it's also about making sure that both sides are getting something interesting out of the relationship. It's not one side takes all, the other gives. It's usually sometimes I have found someone that has a ton of experience in one area of our business and is really interested to learn about another area. And so maybe the first half of an hour coffee, we're talking about problems. And then the second half, we're just having a catch up, and I'm letting them know about what's happening and giving them some industry knowledge and some insight. So I think that it's really important for any relationship that it's never one-sided. And I think that that's, and that you could be quite explicit about it. You could say, hey, you know, I really would love to gain your expertise. Can we grab a coffee? And then if they're interested in continuing that relationship, saying, what can I do to help you? You know, can I tweet about it? Maybe they're building up their own brand and they want people to know that they're out there working with startups. So you don't realize that you, even if you're really small and you're a one-person company, that you actually do have things to offer them in return, whether it's knowledge, insight, public recognition, connections, linking people up. So to really not undervalue yourself in what you can bring to the relationship as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we've got a couple of minutes before we're going to wrap up, and I know several of you are sending through lots of really interesting questions around the kind of a whole spectrum of different themes in startup. My suggestion is that some of these I'm very happy to answer. So some around kind of accounting software and things like that. But I suggest if you take down my email address, which is edward.halliday@kcl.ac.uk. I'll also type it in the chat, and Priya will follow up with it in the follow-up email after this webinar. We're actually running drop-in sessions for people who want one-to-one coaching on how to set up a startup, and also feedback on questions around the accelerator program itself. So for those of you who are asking some of those questions, please feel free to get in touch at any point over the next couple of weeks, and we'll find time to meet with you in person. Before we do wrap up, I would just like to ask one last but very important question to both of you, Jessica and Madeline, which is a final piece of advice for those out there who are starting their own companies. Starting with you, Madeline.
Ooh, a final piece of advice. Well, my go-to one I've already touched upon, because it's read the mom test and seek out support. But I guess my final advice would probably be to make sure that whatever you're doing, you are really passionate about. I know that sounds quite cliche, but I don't know, if you're all KCL students, you might be writing a dissertation. It's kind of the same idea when professors say, don't pick a dissertation topic you don't like, because it will be horrible writing the dissertation. And it's the same thing with the business. It takes so much out of you, so much of your time, so much of your energy. If you don't really love what you're doing and believe what you're doing, it will bring you down. You really need to feel like this is something that you want to dedicate all of your time to. So, yeah, I would make sure that you believe in what you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And how about you, Jessica?
Madeline, I was going to say the same thing. I couldn't agree more. If you're, I might rephrase it a bit in just for uniqueness sake, but really I can't emphasize enough. If you don't become an entrepreneur, don't start a business because you think it's cool to have a startup. And that might sound really obvious, but there's a lot of folks that get into it that way. They're like, oh, right, this is a thing now, and it sounds really cool. being an entrepreneur, starting a company is not like any other job. In a way, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. You know, it's really, people joke like, oh, finding your co-founder and having a co-founder, it's like being in a romantic relationship, you know, with the same highs and lows, and you know, you think you're in love and then you have a horrible fight and all this kind of stuff. It's true, it's all true. And the product, the company, that's your baby. So it's really yeah, like Madeline said, you know, really, for me, I'll just give the example. A lot of folks ask me like, why, how do you do this? And sorry, is that me? No,
Oh, that was me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. You know, and honestly, I could not imagine doing anything else. And that's what reminds me that I know I'm doing exactly the right thing. And then maybe the piece of advice that adds on to that shared advice from Madeline and me is take care of yourself. Because that, when you have that kind of energy and passion for a topic combined with the extremely stressful and ups and downs filled, unstructured life of an entrepreneur, you can burn out quickly. And in different ways. So really, you know, whatever it is you need to do for you, whether it's, you know, making sure you get enough sleep, whether it's exercise, whether it's just having a hobby and making sure, okay, you know, 2 hours a week, I'm just going to do that, even if there's something else on my plate. Because if you don't force yourself to give yourself that kind of time to decompress, your business will suffer. And yeah, so it's bad for you personally, and it's bad for your business professionally. So love what you do, but take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth remembering that this is, you know, not a small decision. It's a big one, and it's a big undertaking to become an entrepreneur. But to close, I mean, that is fundamentally why we do what we do at King's, at the King's 20 Accelerator. We want to make those early stages of setting up a company better supported, better connected, a lot more fun, hopefully. And we feel there is no better time, there has been no better time in history to set up a startup. And we're so proud to be doing what we're doing at King's to support that. And so if you have any questions about the application, if you'd like to meet one-on-one, I've just posted my details through the chat. Applications open until the 9th of June, and we really look forward to seeing applications from hopefully lots of you on this webinar today. So thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to Madeline and Jessica for being part of it.
Perfect. I'd like to then close this webinar with a huge thank you to our panelists again. I'll echo what Ed just said, who've kindly given up their time today to share their wisdom and experience with us. And I hope you've all found this webinar really helpful. Remember to sign up to King's Connect, which is our online platform. Like I said, it's a place where you can connect with alumni and students. 90% of the alumni on there have posted that they're willing to help, and that goes for all kinds of mentoring. And also make sure that you've signed up to hear from updates from the alumni office and other updates in our alumni King's community. Perhaps this webinar has inspired you to explore a business idea more seriously, or to apply to the King's 20 Accelerator program. Just remember that whatever your next step is, the alumni office is here to support you. So if you have any questions about anything that was shared today, don't hesitate to get in touch with the alumni office by emailing us at forever@kcl.ac.uk or through our social media channels at KCL Alumni. And if you'd like to share this webinar with your networks, please don't forget to use the hashtag ForeverKings. Once again, thank you to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you for listening.
Huge pleasure, and good luck all of you aspiring entrepreneurs out there.